from the heart of rural France. This is the Keto Woman podcast, brought to you by me. Hello Keto Lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. I've been keto now for over 2 years, and it has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs under 20 grams a day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like full fat dairy. Choose delicious fatty proteins and be free and easy with oily dressings on salad and butter on your veggies. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalized keto. You'll hear all sorts of ways to keto from my guests. There is no one way to do keto, no one size fits all. I hope to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we really can't give you medical advice. It's always best to consult your own doctor when making big changes to your diet and lifestyle, because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. Wouldn't it be helpful to have one place where you could find all the links? Want to sign up to my new Patreon exclusive Facebook group, Daisy's Lovelies? No problem. How about subscribing to my YouTube channel? Please help me notch up my first 1,000 subscribers by going to links.ketowomanpodcast.com and following the YouTube link. Not following me on Instagram yet? Hit the Instagram button. You get the idea. All the buttons, all the links you need are at links.ketowomanpodcast.com. This week is the second part of my recording with Renée Jones. So if you haven't already, go back to last week's episode, number 98, to catch the first half. Renée has a master's degree in marriage and family counselling and a clinical residency. She uses traditional as well as contemporary models such as relaxation and horse-assisted methods to help others win at losing extra weight and other baggage. She spent 40 years on a diet, yo-yoing up and down the scale before finally stopping the self-sabotage and not only reaching but maintaining her goal weight since 2012. You can find out more about Renée and the services she offers at packyourownbag.com, and all the links we mention on the show will be in the show notes as usual at ketowomanpodcast.com/Renée-Jones. This was another one of those episodes that resonated a lot with my own issues. I think emotional eating is something a lot of us struggle with, so I hope you can get some useful tips and strategies to help you too.
When I did a TEDx talk, I did an exercise with the audience where I had them close their eyes and think of a food and work out then who gave it to you and what was going on. Because for me, peanut butter was a family staple. And my grandmother loved it, and I loved it, my mother loved it. It became to me a tangible connection to the love and encouragement that my nan gave me. I would go to the refrigerator, get the peanut butter when I needed a little of her. And recognizing that made me go, oh, wait, she's definitely not in that jar. Mm-hmm. She's just not in that jar. That's what I need. How do I get that now? How do I get that love? How do I get that encouragement? And then peanut butter paled in significance to me. I don't even buy it much anymore. We bought some to make some peanut butter ice cream once, and it's still in the refrigerator. finding the driver. And sometimes we need help to do that because it's so clear to us, this is what we need. It's hard to see what's pushing that. So I would ask you, for reflection, what is it about chips? What is it about that ice cream that soothed you? Where did that come from?
Trying to figure that out. You're right.
And it may take a little reflection.
Yeah.
But it'll come to you.
Yes, it's very similar. I did a lot of work with a counsellor, and the type of therapy that he uses is called internal family systems therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about looking at the different parts that are within you that are basically parts that stem from childhood. So there'll be some kind of trauma that happened, and that's the exile, that's the child that's been hurt. And then these parts come in to protect you from that as you get older, but they started when you were a child. And they work in all sorts of different ways, but something like comfort eating is what they call a firefighter. So it just rushes in and it tries to soothe the pain quickly, the best way it knows how.
And it works.
To dampen it in some way, yeah, and it works. And then you have these other sort of more managing parts that are often critical that try and stop you from feeling that pain in the first place. So they can, they're these inner critics that say, well, don't do that because it's going to make you feel like that. But they often fight with each other. But accepting that all these parts are part of you and they're trying to protect you, and figuring out what they're protecting, figuring out what their roles are. And their roles that, like you say, it works, and it worked. It worked as that instant response when you were a child, but it tends to get out of sync and out of control as you get older. And it's trying to figure out what's behind that. And once you actually sit down and unpack it and understand it and understand the motives of these parts that are just trying to protect you.
Yes.
And that can be overeating, it can be drug taking, it can be all sorts of things. But basically, if you remember that they're trying to protect you, and ask them what's going on.
We just need to give them a better way to protect us. They're working the only way they know how, right?
That's right.
But as an adult, you can change what they need to do.
Yes, and that's part of the process. It goes on to unpacking what their role is, and then it goes on to finding out that pain back there that is being exiled, that you're trying to be protected from.
Yes.
So you end up by uncovering that. But then when that's all done and resolved, yes, you give these parts of you that have been working so hard a different role, a more grown-up role, a more productive role to be doing.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting process, very illuminating, getting you to, but it's getting in, it's that thing you're talking about, it's trying to figure out what's going on underneath it all.
Well, and sometimes we just need help to do that because we tend to look at that as the child. When we're looking at that, we tend to go back to where we were.
Yeah, because that's how you feel it.
Yeah. And you can't really resolve it from there. I think that's the beauty of a counselor or a coach, is they can be the adult in the room to say, I know you're feeling scared. I know you're feeling this emotion, whatever it is, and I'm going to protect you while we walk through this. And that tends to help. And you get to look from a different perspective. Is that true anymore? Almost like, I remember wearing a size 4 shoe as a child. Now I wear a 7.5. I couldn't put on that shoe if I had to. It would make my feet hurt if I managed to do it, right? It's the same thing with some of these emotions. We need to grow into our size, grow into ourselves as we are now. And once we get all those parts kind of put together, then they work very well. But we have to use what fits us now.
And you touched upon the importance of relationships, particularly it seems when it comes to emotional eating. And you mentioned that positive attachment that you're trying to replicate, I suppose, with the food in question. But there also, I think, there's this friction that exists with relationships, and it seems to be one of the most common things that that triggers problems with eating is some kind of friction, tension with relationships, be it family or friends. I think family is quite often the most common. I know certainly for me, I can almost guarantee. So part of that is a self-fulfilling prophecy that when I go back to the UK and I spend time with family, I'll end up in that cycle. But I have to admit though, that is only part of it. The other part is the availability of different things that are tempting in the UK that aren't available here. Actually, one of the advantages, well, not just with where I live in France, probably most of France is a much more limited palette of the type of foods that I used to overeat. There just isn't as much available, which does help. You know, if it's not there, it means I have to make it. And I used to do that all the time, and I do it a lot less now. So I'm not putting it all on family. It's a mixture of different things. But it seems to be the most common thing when people say they've gone off the rails or they've overeaten or they feel bad, whatever's happening, quite often the cause of that, the trigger, seems to be something to do with a relationship of some kind.
Yeah, and that's just part of life, unfortunately, because relationships do kind of drive us to things. And often it's because we fit back into the role that we used to play with those people. I know when I visit my brother, his wife says, he doesn't do this unless you're around. And he reverts to a 13-year-old boy because he had a great time teasing me and saying things that I'm like, oh, girl, it wasn't funny when you were 13. Why do you think it will be funny now? So we revert to our role very often rather than living who we are now. And some of that you just have to work with. And some of it you have to choose very definitively. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to make choices as me, not in who they need me to be or want me to be, because that's not actually me anymore. And, you know, if my mother were still alive, she would still drive me nuts on some things. And funny, sometimes she still does, and she's not even here. Because the things that you kind of remember them saying. And we have to say, okay, wait. I see what's going on. I don't have to do it this way. And I'm not going to do it this way. But it is very much deciding, how will I emotionally prepare myself to walk into this situation, and what choices will I make?
Yes, it's a difficult one. I know I try and prepare myself every time. I haven't found the
and sometimes it's helpful if you take something with you as a reminder, whether it's a toy or a stone that has a message on it or whatever, something that you can have around you physically that will remind you, okay, this is who we're being. I have this rock that I carry in my pocket, and it's one of those stones that's flat and it has a message on it. And it really helped me when I was trying to adjust myself from being cynical. It helped remind me, okay, we're not being cynical anymore. We're going to choose to imagine the possibilities for good, not the potential disasters that might be coming our way. And that can sometimes help in family situations. Having a mantra in your mind, like my rule of only have sugar on Sundays. I only have sugar on Sundays. I always do what mother says, whatever it happens to be, right? Finding something that helps you bridge that gap between who you are and that can be really helpful.
It's interesting, and it is something you've got to work at, I think.
Yes. You don't change unless you want to.
No.
You didn't change to keto by keeping carbohydrates around, did you?
No, that's right.
You had to work at it.
Yeah, and there are certain choices you have to make. And that's something it's one of the ways that I find it easy to do when I'm at home, because it's my home.
Yes.
It's only my home. I don't have to share it with anybody. So that means I can completely dictate what's in the house.
Indeed.
And that's part of what's difficult when I go somewhere else, because there are all these things available. And I know for me, if those things were in my house, I would eat them. So I don't allow them into the house in the first place. But so I'm quite lucky to be able to do that. A lot of people aren't. So I guess they just have to go through a different set of steps, a different system to try and work out how they're going to manage their keto. But I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be in a family home that had all those things available all the time and avoid them.
You want some ideas?
Yeah.
Yeah? So one of the things that I find helpful, if my husband comes in with salted, roasted nuts, I say, oh, no. Do not leave these here. Take them up to your office, take them back to the office, whatever it is, they cannot be in the kitchen. They just can't. Now, that was 2 years ago. He has some in my pantry at the moment, and he was away for a week, and I put them in his sock drawer because I had to have them out of my kitchen. And then the second time, I just put them up on a high shelf in the pantry. And then this last week, I didn't even think about the nuts. It took a while for me to adjust to they are going to be here, but I'm not choosing to eat them because I eat too many of them. I don't have an off switch when it comes to salted roasted nuts.
Me too. Yeah.
So you have to work with things. Another thing you can do is in your pantry or your larder, if you put the things that are not yours onto a shelf that is not at your eye level, and even better if you put them in an opaque container, out of sight is out of mind. That does help. You can give them a particular cupboard. You don't go in that. Or you can remember that some of these foods are not mine. If I have them, I'm stealing, even if I bought them, because they are not mine. And sometimes things like that will help you to kind of stop yourself before you make a choice that you're not happy with.
And as well, I think that almost inevitably has to involve the rest of the family.
It does help, yes.
I see people talking about how, my husband just refuses basically to not bring carbs into the house or to keep them somewhere else or not to eat things in front of me or whatever it is. But it sounds like you potentially would be able to get to that place with them being able to do what they wanted to do within certain boundaries. If they would cooperate a bit to start with, to sort of get you there.
Yes.
Because I often say to people, well, surely can you not come to some kind of compromise with them that they either keep them out of the house or keep them in a special cupboard or whatever it is while you're getting to that place where you can have them around and it not be a problem.
Yeah, and it takes time.
And I think that's reasonable. I think it's reasonable to expect that of the other people in your household to work with you, especially if it's just going to be for a limited time, to help you with that.
I would say that's reasonable. And if it turns out not to be reasonable to someone else, then that's a different conversation, isn't it?
Yes, and I think often actually what's involved there is an issue that they have, that they're feeling threatened in some way, maybe that you're trying to take something away from them that's important that they need to work on, basically.
Yeah, that's just a bigger conversation overall. Because when I told my husband, take these up, he said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I will do whatever you need. And that was lovely.
Yes, and actually that's going to feed in well to the feeling cared for state, isn't it?
Exactly. So, relationships are all different and they all work differently, but it's, hopefully they'll be supportive.
There are a couple of suggested questions and topics you sent me before we started. There were just some things that intrigued me.
Okay. Go on.
So
Go on then.
Like to explore them. This first one is something I kind of had some things in my mind when I read it. I'd just be interested where you were going to go with it. And the question was, what is the biggest problem with weight loss? Because I can see that going different ways.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with weight loss is that we do not make lasting changes. We look at it as a short-term solution. And then, we get to where we're going and we go right back to the way we ate. if we can make it a lifestyle, then it keeps us from getting the same result we always did when we were eating the way we did before.
I also think that maintenance is a really difficult concept for a lot of us to practice.
It certainly can be.
Anyone who's been involved in dieting, I mean, I've spent most of my life either gaining weight or losing weight.
Yes, me too.
Nothing in between. I've either been feeling virtuous and losing weight or feeling guilty, shameful and gaining weight. And it's always been one or the other. Trying to maintain weight loss at wherever you are. So many people talk about how they've lost weight, they've lost a chunk of weight, and now nothing's happening. They haven't lost weight for however long. It might be a couple of weeks, it might be a couple of months, it might be a couple of years, but they are maintaining. They still sometimes see that as something negative. And I experienced that. I felt it during the 2 or 3 years where I was losing weight fairly rapidly after weight loss surgery. When I would go for 3 months without losing weight, it was, well, what's going on? This is wrong. This is not good. But of course, that was brilliant in comparison to putting on weight.
Yeah.
And when you do get to where you're going, you've got to maintain it. Yeah. And that's where you're saying with this thing is a short-term thing. Because that's what happens so often. It's certainly what happened to me when I did actually get to my goal weight and stayed there for all of about a week. Because it was like, oh, well, I've done it now. I can, whatever.
I tend to weed my garden at various intervals. And those weeds always tend to come back. If I don't continue to pull weeds, they will take over. So I think that is quite akin to weight loss maintenance. If I don't pull the weeds, if I don't pay attention, give my body what it needs, extract things it doesn't, adjust as we go along, my body will be taken over by the weed of excess fat. We do it in other areas. We just don't think about it in terms of weight loss and maintenance. But life is about maintenance in everything. You dust your house. You watch your budget. You see friends. It's all about maintenance. Dieting is no different.
That's right. And that's often where the harder work is in some ways.
Yeah.
And it is, it's really hard to lose weight, but it's somehow, I don't know, the focus is different, isn't it?
Yes.
So I suppose it's because you have this goal, whereas maintenance seems to be a bit more goalless, although of course it isn't really. The goal is staying where you are.
I have a mental alarm that goes off when I gain more than 3 or 4 or 5 pounds. At 5, it's like, okay, what's happened? What's going on? And we're going back to where we were. So, as I say, I bounce between 115 and 120 pounds. When I hit 120, I think, oh, okay, we're getting too much of something. Let's adjust. And I get back down to 115, 117, somewhere in there, and that's where I stay. But if that alarm didn't go off, I would very quickly be at 125, 130, 40, 50, 60, But starting when I need to lose 2 or 3 or 4 pounds, it's a whole lot easier than waiting until it is 8, 9, or 10, or 20. So the maintenance is, okay, when we hit this, we got to straighten up. We've got to do things the way we know it works for us. That's the key to maintenance.
Yeah, so it's a constant sort of slight readjustment and keep looking. I tell you what came to my mind, it's something completely different really, a different perspective onto that with what the biggest problem with weight loss, or I guess what are some of the problems with weight loss. And I think this is particularly true for when you're losing a lot of weight. So you change significantly.
Yes.
In appearance, probably also with what you're capable of doing, probably changes to your confidence, all sorts of things. And it's another thing that I see quite a lot, and is quite often tied up with relationships with other people, is you think everything should be great when you're losing weight and everyone should be really happy about it. But they're often not.
Yeah.
And that comment, which I think, I don't know, I would hazard a guess that most of us have heard, if we've been very overweight for a significant period of time and then we lose a significant amount of weight, is, oh, you're getting too thin. Yeah. Don't lose too much weight.
Yeah.
Those kind of comments.
Yeah.
And, where's that coming from?
Some of it is, I can't keep up with you if you're too thin. I can't compete with you. And some of it is just a genuine sense of what the appropriate size should be, right? I mean, we get this model mentality, the airbrushed model mentality. I remember when I went to Wales the first time, I was quite heavy. And then when I went back, I had lost some. I wasn't thin by any stretch of the imagination, but I was smaller. And the people that knew me before was like, oh, you've lost so much weight. Oh, you can't get too thin. That's not good for you. And I thought, what is wrong with you? I'm healthier. But their sense of the size of a woman has not changed as much as the sense of American sizes. I mean, if you think about Marilyn Monroe, she was probably a size 12, and she was the model woman in the 60s. But then came Twiggy. You lot gave her to us, mind. That's you.
You're welcome.
And we thought, oh, everyone ought to be really thin, so then started the aerobics thing, and then the food pyramid nonsense. It just changed our perception of what a woman ought to be. My mother-in-law likes Ralph Lauren clothes. I love the blouses, cannot wear anything for the waist because Ralph designs his clothes for a board. And I have hips and a waist. So our perception of what is the appropriate size influences what we think of as healthy. And then, of course, there's the other stuff like, I was trying to lose weight and I haven't done it, and you're kind of betraying us by losing weight because you show us up. So the relationships, there's so much that goes into that. But you need to do what you feel good doing, not what someone else says you need to.
So much changes, and those relationships have to adjust because more often than not, your personality changes a bit as your size changes.
Yeah.
And that just impacts, doesn't it? Something that I hadn't expected. With hindsight, I should have expected, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of people. I was big. I was twice the size I am now. And what I hadn't realized was that I used that literal wall actually of fat. I mean, I used it. I hid behind it. Well, it seems crazy to say I made myself invisible because you kind of make yourself more visible when you cover yourself with fat, but you can also very effectively hide behind it. And when I lost a big chunk of that weight, I felt exposed.
Yes.
And it was terrifying. Yeah. And I did do a lot of work with my counsellor about that. But people were looking at me differently with a kind of scrutiny that I felt very uncomfortable with. And I think a lot of that stemmed back to something that happened in my childhood. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
But it was this wall of protection that I'd built around myself that I could hide behind. And once it had gone, that was actually really scary. And I've heard people talking about this, Gabor Mate, and he spoke about somebody who, the same, it was a woman who lost a lot of weight and got to her target weight, but she put it back on because she ended up losing it again because they dealt with what was the issue that she'd built that fat wall around herself with. But when it came down and she couldn't deal with it, so she built it up again. Yeah.
I have a number of clients, as well as myself, who had some sexual abuse, physical abuse as a child. And it's very common to make yourself bigger, to protect against that, to make sure, men don't find you attractive or women don't find you attractive because you've got plenty of padding and plenty of protection. And it does make you a little more invisible. And if you're concerned about too much extra attention, it works very effectively. So that's not an uncommon scenario. It worked for me. And it works for a lot of people. But once I got my heart healed from some of that, it was much easier to let the weight go and let it stay away. You get stronger physically as well as emotionally.
That's right. But it's Yeah, it's something to be aware of. Like I say, with hindsight, you think, well, why didn't I think of that side of it? But I guess you just kind of forget that association.
Well, and it's perspective as well. I don't know about you, but I need a mirror to check the back of my head, make sure my hair's doing what it's supposed to do. I need a different perspective. You can't do it from the perspective you're stuck in.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. It's like what you were saying before about working with somebody else to solve these things, because it is very difficult to see it.
Yeah.
You can't see it when you're stuck in the weeds yourself. How can you see that different perspective?
Yeah, exactly. I give my clients a wristband and it says, check your compass, because when you're lost, you kind of need some help, right? So the exercise is that you kind of go out and you think, what is it that I want to do? What would make me feel great? That sort of thing. And the end of that exercise is you make that your compass. So the wristband is just one of those tangible reminders. And I've got a video of that. We can make it a gift to your audience if that would be helpful. Because you do have to realize, okay, what is it that I'm working toward? How do I stay there? How do you check your compass to get where you want to go?
Yeah, it always comes back to this awareness of what's going on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You mentioned a sleeper, in quotation marks, yo-yo diet.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to know what you mean by that.
You know, when you do yo-yo tricks, you do the sleeper, the yo-yo goes down and it just spins at the end of the string. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just spinning. And it doesn't go up, doesn't go down. It just goes there. And I think very often thinking that the next magic thing will work for us, the next magic potion or pill or exercise routine will work for us.
That's very familiar. Yeah.
Is sleeping at the end of the string. It's never going to help you until you decide this is what you want and this is what you're going to do. And you deal with your stuff so that you no longer have to stuff your face.
Yes, I think that applies to quite a few different things in life, that something different is going to make everything okay. A change of job, moving somewhere else, you put some kind of distant everything on that. Everything will be different. Everything will work out when I do that, when I lose the weight. I'll be happy. Everything will be great. When I can just lose the weight, because that's everything. That's what's, ruining my life. But then you get there and it's like, oh,
I'm still here.
Well, some things are better, but I don't suddenly feel fantastic. What's going on?
Yeah. And we do have to make more changes than just location or just size. And we can do that. We can certainly do that. But you've got to have everything consistent. Change more than one thing. Let that be the catalyst for other changes.
And how much do you think fitting into descriptions, into boxes, being a certain personality type, how much do you think that dictates or should instruct your approach? I'm thinking here in particular of Gretchen Rubin's abstainer versus moderator, and identifying which one you are and adopting that approach. I'm just wondering how much you go with that. It seems to me that maybe when you talk about making these choices, that goes away from that. I don't know. I'm intrigued to know your thoughts on that.
Well, I am a moderator, so I allow that. It works for me to be a moderator. In some things, I'm an abstainer. Again, if I start with salted roasted nuts, it's over unless it's in a portion size and there are no more. So I think it depends on what works with you. I'm also, in that same book, she talks about the different personality types, the upholder, the questioner, the obliger, and the rebel. And I am such an obliger, it doesn't ring true. I mean, it's just amazing how much of an obliger I am, right? So actually, my work serves as an accountability for me, because I can't help people overcome their emotional eating unless I'm doing it. I have a dog and we walk every morning. She is my accountability. You have to set it up so that it works for you in your personality. You have to set it up so that your bodily needs are met. So I'm very much, if you know what your personality is, you have so many more tools to work with it. I have 2 clients at the moment. I have this intensive 3-month package, and I have 2 right now who are actually rebels.
Me.
Are you a rebel?
I'm one of those. Yeah.
So what I don't say to them, you have to do it this way. I say, okay, working with your personality and who you want to be, how do you want to approach this? Because for them, it requires that they not have such strict rules. They not have definite things. It has to go very much with their personality and who they want to be. And that's how you appeal to them. So that's one of the tests that I have all of my clients take so that I know, okay, how do I approach this person? So it very much informs you of your superpowers as well as your kryptonite. And you have to work with both in order to succeed.
Oh, very interesting. So you really do go with that. And again, it comes back to this self-awareness and figuring out who you are and how you best operate and how you can make things work for you.
Yes.
Rather than trying to, because I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That's part of the problem with diets, with any kind of plan, is trying to force yourself into somebody else's mold. And for some people, it'll work because it happens that that's the right mold for them. But for all the people that it isn't, and so it doesn't work, well, it's my fault because I haven't managed to squeeze myself into that mold. If only I could squeeze myself into that mold, it would work.
I wouldn't make you try to wear my shoes, Daisy, because it wouldn't fit you, right? You have to find what works for you and your body. And those strict rules do not work for rebels.
No.
In fact, it tends to make you want those things more. So if you tell yourself, I can't have this, hide and watch, right?
Yeah, that's the frustrating part of that personality type. It's not only, I absolutely know if somebody else tries to tell me to do something, my automatic instinctive response is to want to do the opposite of what they've said.
Yep.
Even if what they're suggesting is a really good idea. It's just this gut feeling that comes out. Whatever you're trying to tell me to do, I want to do the opposite purely because you're telling me to do it. But the problem is that also applies to me. So anything that I'm trying to tell myself to do, I have that same gut response. Well, I'm not doing it then.
Yeah. So when you're feeling that, you come back and you say, okay, what works for me in this situation? How can I work this to be who I want to be? And if that means, because you can make yourself do anything you really want to do, right?
True, yeah.
When you do a podcast every week, how do you make yourself do that? It's who you want to be. So if you can put it in those terms of, I want to be this or this person, that will help you adjust all of those things that, are requirements as such to fit you. And in the end, that's what it comes down to. What fits you and who you want to be, your future self, not necessarily your past self. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Completely.
Does it help?
Yeah, I struggle with it. It's something I struggle with all the time because a big part of me does like the thought of order and, something neat and laid out with rules. Because if there are rules written down in black and white, the logic of it is, and I'm a very logical person, that the results will be black and white too. If you do X, Y, and Z, this is what you're going to end up with.
Yeah.
But my natural response is to fight against it because I won't be told what to do. So it's this constant sort of battle going on and trying to get something productive out of it at the end.
And because we don't live in closed systems, sometimes even when we follow the rules, the result isn't what we were expecting. But sometimes we can find good in that because we get lovely surprises. Oh, Jiminy, I'm glad it didn't work out that way because I didn't really want that. But I do want what I got.
Yes, and like you were saying about that accountability with others, and that, that quite often works with me as well. I think, that is part of what happens with the podcast. I've got to have the podcast out every week. I might push it sometimes with what time it comes out. That's probably part of the rebel coming out, pushing against it.
Yeah.
And there's that part of me that sometimes argues when I don't really feel like, well, I'll put out a repeat episode or whatever. But no, there's that determination to have an episode out every week. Mm-hmm. And that drives me. And just like you were saying with your dogs, the joy I see in my dogs when we go out for a walk, how much they enjoy it and how much I enjoy it as well. Yeah. But it's something that you have to do, but for a good reason.
Yeah. You have to frame it in a way that works for you.
Yes, I think that's the trick, isn't it? It's the framing.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's fascinating, I think, isn't it? Figuring out what kind of personality you are, as to figuring out what kind of approach works for you. Yeah. Because, you must be completely different being an obliger. I think that's the opposite end of
pretty much,
of the scale, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and for an obliger, if I've promised you something, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to get there. If I have to kill myself to do what I told you I would do that. Holding myself to account, that's a little harder. I need the external accountability to make it work, but you don't. You need external hands-off in order to make it work for you, except where it feeds into who you want to be. And that's the trick. Find how it helps you get to where you want to go and who you want to be, and that's your lever.
It's complicated, isn't it? But fascinating. I do find it very interesting.
But this is why I love my job, because psychology is fascinating.
Yeah. It absolutely is. If I could go back, I would have gone down more of that path. Talking about it's your job and it's what you do and you love doing it. Tell us a bit more about how people can find you, the resources that you have, what videos are available, book that's available, and if they want to take that further and work with you, how do they do that?
My website is packyourownbag.com. If you would like to see a video of the compass exercise, they can go to packyourownbag.com/friends and the video will come to you. I do coaching and counseling. It kind of depends on the need. Sometimes you just need someone to pick you up where you are and help you go forward. And then the counseling part is sometimes we need to look at that past stuff that gets in the way. I'm running a special offer on the 3-month intensive right now, and that is at packyourownbag.com/special. And it's the 3 months of working with me. And it's not a group thing. It is a one-to-one thing at this point. And you get so many sessions and access to my video stuff. The book is What's Really Eating You? Overcoming the Triggers of Comfort Eating. And that's on Amazon. I think it's also on the Barnes & Noble site. And I have a TEDx talk, just TEDx Renée Jones, and you'll find that on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel.
I'll put all the links to all these things. I'll put in the show notes as well. So people haven't got to remember.
But yeah, anyone wants to work with me, contact me, call me, email, whatever. And we'll work out what will be most helpful for you.
Fantastic. Because, well, like with all these things, a different approach, a different package is going to be more appropriate for different people. It's going to very much depend what you would need as to what would help you.
Yeah.
It might just be that reading the book is good for you. It might be that 3 months intensive package is good for you.
It may just be some one-on-one sessions, or the accountability stuff will work for you.
Absolutely.
But what works for you is what works for you, and that's what you need. What works for your Aunt Ella may not actually work for you.
Exactly. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you today. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
I knew I was going to. Emotional eating and comfort eating and all those things, and that battle that goes on in my head a lot. And I know it does for a number of other people too.
Indeed. Me too.
So what would be, you've given us lots of tips, but what would be your top tip?
One of the things that I found really helpful was to set alarms on my phone. And what I found out, because I'm old, is that you can change the word from alarm to something else. So I set alarms throughout the day to go off with things that I need to hear. If I'm trying to change something about myself or something about how I think, then I put that in there. And it helps me remember, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? Right, this is the focus. And it's pretty easy to do. And it's one of those things that you actually have to look at your phone and turn it off. Because even if your phone is on mute, it will sound. If you've got a headset in, it will sound. And you actually have to physically go look at it and hit stop. It's been very helpful for me.
Oh, that's interesting. So you can put in an alarm that's something like a phrase or a motto or something like that.
And you can choose the phrase depending on what you need at that time. I've been doing this for like 3 years and they change all the time. Once I think I've got it, then I change it to something else that I need.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. It sounds like along the same lines as affirmations.
Yeah.
That kind of approach.
Yeah. An affirmation, encouragement, a focus, whatever you need it to be. And you can set off lots of them. I have like 6. I had to turn them off because some of them go during the time that we're doing this. So I had to turn them off, but I'll turn them back on.
It would have been interesting to see what would it have been that came up at that time when we were recording. These are the things that come up every day, the same.
Well, until I change them. One of them, the very first one is walk in light of your vision. And then I got a little flourishy and I added with monastic daily rigor. But it could be, one of the things that I focus on is helping people heal their hearts. So that's one. Heal hearts, bring life. To remind me, that's what I want to do. That's how I want to help somebody. Or it could be something personal, like I see you. Because women have a real thing about being seen, not just physically, but someone seeing our hearts. And that was one that I used early on so that I would remember that, yes, my heart is being seen. It's good.
That's a great tip. I like that. It's a different thing that I wasn't necessarily, well, I don't know what I would have been expecting, but it's, that's a really interesting one that's given me food for thought.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for sharing your time. I know it's very early in the day for you.
It's all right.
So thank you. Yes, you're very much an early bird. I see. What time did you say you get up at 5:30 or something crazy?
5 or 5:30. But, part of that is the pets. They like to get up early.
Yes, I always think that potentially would help me, but mine are very good at just adjusting to what I do. So they don't make me get up early, unfortunately. Would be very helpful if they did, actually.
It's the current ones. The ones we've had before always slept, and it was quite a surprise to me that some don't go back to sleep. We got used to it, and it's good. We get lots of things done.
Well, thank you very much, Renée. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
To get the resources and links from this show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com/episodes. Please share this podcast with as many people as possible by sharing one of my links or just taking a screenshot of an episode that you enjoyed. Reviews really help raise the profile of the podcast, which gets it in front of more people, but also helps me attract a wide variety of guests. So please take a minute to leave a review on whichever podcast app or platform you like to listen on. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support really does mean the world to me. Thank you. Are you enjoying this podcast? Help me make more episodes and videos by making a pledge at my Patreon page, patreon.com/KetoWoman. Or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. Don't forget to join in the fun on the Keto Woman Podcast Instagram and Facebook pages, and Daisy_Keto Woman on Twitter. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you would like to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. This week's end quote is from Astrid Alauda. Don't let your mind bully your body into believing it must carry the burden of its worries. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.